We're going to show you 5 times where Spider-Man took off the gloves. From horrifying beatdowns that are all too out of character for the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man to desperate acts of questionable superheroics, here are 5 times when Spider-Man didn't hold back. Spidey severs Scorpion's jaw. Within the pages of Amazing Spider-Man 700, the lead up to what would eventually be known as Dan Slott's Superior Spider-Man run, Peter Parker is basically dead. In a nutshell, Otto Octavius aka Doc Ock did a whole hardcore Freaky Friday experiment which had this villain ultimately taking control of Peter's body. Now at this point in time, nobody knew that Otto was actually the one underneath Spidey's trademark mask, and we mean no one. Not MJ, not the Avengers, and certainly not Mac Gargan, the classic Spidey nemesis known as Scorpion. So in a classic act of supervillainy, Scorpion came barging through a safe room where J. Jonah Jameson, his dad, Aunt May, and MJ are hiding out. Matt's out for blood. He blames the Daily Bugle publisher and the EIC for being the one responsible for turning him into a cybernetic freak. To Triple J's credit, he was willing to sacrifice himself to Gargan in exchange for letting everyone else inside the safe room go. But Scorpion, being evil and all, wanted to make J. Jonah suffer as much as possible, deciding that he's gonna start by killing his dad and Aunt May first. While Scorpion's murderous plans are quickly foiled as soon as he thinks about it when Otto, now donning the mantle of Spider-Man, swings right onto the scene. What ensues inside this broken down room shocks everyone, including Gargan himself, as it doesn't take Spider-Man a minute, and not even a single thwip of his webbing, to give Scorpion one of the most devastating right hooks any Marvel character has received. A punch so hard that it rips Scorpion's jaw right off his face. In his defense, Otto Spidey didn't realize that a single punch was enough to separate Scorpion's jaw from his skull. In fact, even he realized that Peter Parker was basically holding back every time they fought in the past. But you know, this ain't your daddy, Spider-Man, and you can bet that Otto's gonna make full use of every weapon in Peter's superpowered body. Now we realize that this wasn't exactly the Spider-Man we know. Otto was controlling him, but we wanted to include this because it shows how much Spider-Man has been holding back in the past. Spidey becomes cold-blooded. By now, we all know that Spider-Man doesn't kill, or at the very least, he doesn't do it intentionally. But there's one line you don't cross with the wall crawler: family. To put it simply, Peter Parker, your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, drops the whole nice guy deal whenever you put one of his loved ones in harm's way. To that effect, Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, learned it in the most brutal way possible. During the Back in Black storyline, Kingpin has been incarcerated, but that didn't stop him from putting out a hit on Aunt May after finding out Spidey's true identity. Long story short, Aunt May gets sniped and is left in a coma, fighting for her life in a hospital bed. This sends Pete down a bloody, violent spiral. First off, he made sure that nothing and no one can stop him from getting his hands on the obese crime lord, so he didn't think twice about putting on his symbiote suit, which not only enhances his powers, but allows him to give in to his most basic desires. In this case, it's to kill the Kingpin. Spider-Man would eventually get to the bald-headed crime boss, and in the middle of every other scumbag prisoner within that building, he proceeded to give Wilson a beating harder than Wolverine's adamantium-laced bones. The badassery doesn't even stop there. In a rare moment of pure, unfettered rage, Pete even takes off his mask right in front of the man, just so he knows who's about to put his hands on him. At one point, Peter even shoved his wrist right in front of Fisk's mouth, threatening to give him a mouthful of webbing so that he could die in the most painful way possible. But Pete didn't ultimately kill the Kingpin in this encounter. Don't get it twisted though, it wasn't due to Spidey remembering his vows. In one of the most cold-blooded gangster lines in all of comics, he basically tells Kingpin that he's going to spare him so he can always remember this moment, the moment where Fisk was absolutely humiliated in front of his fellow criminals. In the end, Pete vows that if Aunt May does indeed succumb to her gunshot wounds, he'll come back for Fisk to finish the job. Spidey strangles a man to death. At its core, Spider-Man's crusade to fight evil is more or less a way to atone for a huge mistake he made in his early days, which was inadvertently getting Uncle Ben shot. But as the pages of Amazing Spider-Man 525 would have us fans witness, the wall-crawling superhero is willing to make more quote-unquote missteps if it means protecting his loved ones. In this issue, mech-themed supervillain Tracer has unleashed an army of robots across New York to wreak havoc. Little did the web-slinging superhero know that this was just all a diversion for Tracer to pay a certain old lady a visit, Aunt May. Now, to be completely honest, Tracer isn't like Kingpin in that he wasn't necessarily planning on harming sweet Aunt May to make Peter suffer. He's just, well, aware of the fact that Spider-Man's going to eventually show up if he pays the old lady a visit. In fact, Aunt May and Tracer even had a nice little chat in the middle of the kitchen, and she even made him a peanut butter sandwich. But as we said, you do not mess with Spider-Man's family as the wall crawler swings into the room before Tracer could even have a bite of the late night snack. What makes this particular instance in Spidey's history such a shocker is how Tracer doesn't even fight back when the wall crawler pounces on him, shoots webs around his neck, and proceeds to strangle the living daylights out of him. Spidey got so heated up here that he won't even listen to Aunt May's pleas to spare the guy. Peter just pulled and pulled and pulled until Tracer was dead in front of him. Now, it would be revealed that Tracer's actually just a robot, but I don't think that gives Spider-Man a pass here. He didn't know that, which means Pete was more than willing to kill someone for getting his family involved in his superheroic problems. Spidey casually throws a guy off a bridge. Let's just say that it's a big deal whenever a superhero decides to break their own code and decide to kill someone, much more for a character like Spider-Man, who's the epitome of morality and responsibility in the Marvel universe. However, you might just change your opinion about the friendly neighborhood web-slinger when you find out what happens within the pages of Marvel Team Up number 12. This comic shows Spider-Man going against a mystical D-level villain named Moondark who can access a power called the Mists of Passage and use it as a sort of portal to travel around the city. During their climactic battle, Old Webhead kicks Moondark into an open mist of passage that leads right on top of the Golden Gate Bridge, causing the obscure supervillain to fall to his death. Now, to be completely fair, Spidey did rush towards Moondark to save the guy, but he was too late. According to Pete, Moondark missed his hand by an inch. But what truly makes this one of the most hardcore moments in Spider-Man history is the way that the wall crawler nonchalantly shrugs off the whole deal after, pushing a man to his death. Spidey thinks to himself, well, you can't cry over spilt magicians, and I guess nobody but me will even remember what went on tonight, before casually thinking about swinging back to the Daily Bugle to get on with his other job as a photographer. I guess you have to be at least a B-lister to make Spidey think twice before killing you. Spidey tears off a person's face. Now, how many times do these Marvel supervillains need to be reminded that you never go after Spider-Man's family? Peter Parker learned his whole concept of family love and duty from the Vin Diesel school of Fast and Furious. Simply put, the wall crawler won't hold anything back if you harm even a single hair on any of his close friends and family. That's exactly what happens within the pages of Amazing Spider-Man 637 as the crazy-ass Kravenov family, Kraven the Hunter's kids, killed Kane Parker, Pete's clone, who for all intents and purposes was basically the closest thing Webhead had to a brother. And the Kravenovs, being the Kravenovs, they did it in order to perform a nutty ritual that would resurrect Sergei, the OG Kraven the Hunter, and the Kravenov family patriarch from the grave. To the kids' credit, the ritual ultimately works and Sergei comes alive again, but they have no idea at the time that this was going to be a short-lived victory. Peter ends up donning the symbiote suit after witnessing Kane's death, and we all know what happens whenever Spider-Man wears those black tights. Spider-Man goes to where all the Kravenovs are hanging out and picks them off one by one. Spider-Man really unleashes that burning rage and doesn't hold back when he spots Sasha Kravenov, one of Sergei's crazy kids, as the wall crawler stalks her in the shadows. The not-so-friendly neighborhood Spider-Man utters his own version of the Lannisters send their regards to Sasha, telling her that my brother wanted to give you this, before palming her face and yanking hard. Now, we all know that those little micro hairs on Pete's hands allow him to crawl walls. They're basically strong enough to latch on brick and concrete. So just imagine the kind of damage when these hook-like hairs are attached to flesh and then abruptly pulled away. That's right, guys, Spider-Man ripped Sasha's face off, tearing the skin off it clean and leaving an indelible permanent palm-shaped scar that will always remind her what happens when you mess around with Spidey's people whenever she looks into the mirror.